My parents never loved me. My name is Chloe Anderson, I'm 22, and today, on my sister's wedding day, I was once again just a shadow. A helper, not a guest. The proof was a simple, brutal omission on the seating chart. A space for Chloe. But no +1. They hadn't just forgotten my boyfriend, Liam. They had forgotten he existed. That I existed as a person with a life separate from their gravitational pull. But today, all of that was going to change. Today, the shadow was going to eclipse the sun. The air in the bridal suite at the Hotel Sorrento was thick with the chemical sweetness of hairspray and the cloying scent of lilies, the flower of choice for my sister Ashley's understated yet elegant nuptials. Understated was a word my family loved to use. It was code for exorbitantly expensive but designed to look effortless. Our family wasn't just wealthy. We were Seattle old money, the kind that smelled of damp earth from sprawling estates on Lake Washington and the faint metallic tang of generational privilege. Ashley, the sun itself, sat enthroned before a gilded mirror, a team of artists flitting around her like hummingbirds. She was beautiful, of course. She'd always been beautiful, with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the blue of a clear summer sky over the Puget Sound. She was the A student, the varsity tennis captain, the one who'd gone to Stanford while I'd settled for the University of Washington. She was the masterpiece. I was the forgotten sketch in the corner of the canvas. Chloe, honey, can you find my mother-of-pearl earrings? The ones Daddy gave me for graduation. Her voice was musical, accustomed to immediate compliance. Sure, Ash, I mumbled, my voice swallowed by the room's frantic energy. My mother, Catherine, swept past me, her silk dress rustling like dry leaves. And Chloe, once you've done that, run down to the lobby and make sure the florist has set up the arrangements for the entryway correctly. The calla lilies should be dominant, not the hydrangeas. Your father is paying a fortune for dominance. She didn't look at me as she spoke, her focus already on adjusting a stray curl on Ashley's head. A familiar bitterness rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I wasn't a bridesmaid. Ashley had a gaggle of 6 sorority sisters for that, all of them clones of her, teetering in identical blush-pink heels. My role, it seemed, was unpaid intern for the wedding of the century. I was the runner, the finder, the fixer, the ghost in the machine. I found the earrings nestled in a velvet box and handed them to Ashley. She smiled, a dazzling, thoughtless flash of perfect teeth. Thanks, Chloe. You're a lifesaver. I wasn't a lifesaver. I was a saboteur. In the pocket of my simple navy blue dress, bought off the rack at Nordstrom because no one had time to help me find a proper outfit, was a small, cold rectangle of metal and plastic. USB drive. It felt impossibly heavy, like a stone that could sink our entire family's gilded ship. It contained the truth, or at least, a version of it powerful enough to shatter the perfect stained glass window of the Anderson family. My investigation had started 3 months ago, born from a casual, cruel comment. We were at a family dinner celebrating Ashley's engagement to Mark Renshaw. Mark was perfect naturally. A Wharton graduate with a jawline that could cut glass and a burgeoning career in private equity. He was charming, attentive, and looked at Ashley like she was the only person in the world. My father, Richard Anderson, had clapped him on the back. Mark, my boy, you're not just getting a wife. You're saving a legacy. Everyone had laughed, assuming it was a joke about continuing the family line. But I saw something flicker in my father's eyes. A desperation I'd never seen before. And I saw the way Mark's smile didn't quite reach his own. It was a conspirator's smile. That night I started digging. It wasn't hard. My father, a man who still thought firewalls were something you built in a forest, had a password for his laptop that was laughably simple. Ashley 1995. Course. What I found was rot. A foundation crumbling to dust beneath a pristine facade. Anderson Timber, the company our great-grandfather had founded, the source of our effortless wealth, was hemorrhaging money. A series of bad investments, a changing market. My father had steered the ship directly toward an iceberg. Mark's private equity firm wasn't just a convenient connection. It was a lifeline. This marriage wasn't a union of love. It was a merger. A buyout in the form of a wedding vow. Ashley was the prize, yes, but she was also the collateral. That alone was disgusting, a betrayal of my sister's trust. But I kept digging, driven by a lifetime of feeling second best, of knowing that if I were in Ashley's shoes, my father would have let me sink. In a password-protected folder labeled contingencies, I found the rest. Mark wasn't just a corporate shark. He was a cheat. There were emails, explicit and nauseating, to another woman, a junior analyst at his firm named Sarah. They weren't just flirting. They were planning a future. A future for after Mark had stabilized his position. There were photos too. Selfies from a hotel room in New York, time-stamped from a business trip he'd supposedly taken alone. He was smiling in them, a genuine, unguarded smile I'd never seen him give my sister. The USB drive in my pocket contained it all. The damning financial reports, the email chains between my father and Mark outlining the terms of the arrangement, and the entire sordid affair with Sarah, complete with photos. Chloe. The flowers. My mother's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. On it, I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. As I rode the elevator down, the ornate brass cage felt like it was shrinking, the air thinning. For a moment, a wave of nausea and doubt washed over me. I saw Ashley's face in my mind, her eyes shining with pure, unadulterated happiness. Was I really going to do this to her? Shatter her world on the one day that was supposed to be perfect? She'll thank you one day, a cold, hard voice in my head insisted. She needs to know who she's marrying, who her father really is. But another, smaller voice whispered, "You're not doing this for her. You're doing this for you. This is revenge for every forgotten birthday, every missed school play, every time they looked right through you." The lobby was a cathedral of flowers. Calla lilies, just as my mother had demanded, stood like architectural marvels in massive urns. The scent was funereal. As I confirmed the arrangement with the harried florist, my phone buzzed. It was Liam. "Thinking of you. You're going to be the most beautiful one there. Wish I could be by your side." A tear pricked my eye. I typed back a quick "I love you" and shoved the phone back in my pocket. The reminder of his absence, of their casual cruelty, solidified my resolve. They hadn't just ignored him. They had erased my happiness as irrelevant. My pain was the kindling and that USB drive was the match. The ceremony was held in the hotel's Spanish ballroom, a cavernous space with dark wood beams and glittering chandeliers. I stood at the back, a sentinel in navy blue, watching as my father walked Ashley down the aisle. He looked proud, regal, a king giving away his princess. He was a fraud, selling his own daughter to save his crumbling kingdom. Ashley was radiant. The white dress was a cloud of silk and lace around her. When she reached the altar, Mark took her hand, and his face was a perfect mask of adoration. I watched them exchange vows they didn't mean, promises built on a scaffolding of lies. "I, Mark, take you, Ashley, to be my wife," he said, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "To have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer." Richer, I thought, my hand instinctively going to the drive in my pocket. Definitely for richer. The crowd sighed, some dabbed at their eyes. They were all watching a fairy tale. I was the only one who had read the grim original version. During the vows, I felt a flicker of the old, familiar jealousy. Not for Mark, but for the ease of it all. The world had always bent itself to Ashley's will. It had laid a path of rose petals at her feet. My path had been unpaved, full of rocks and thorns I'd had to navigate alone. Even my act of rebellion felt like a desperate scrabble for attention, a child's scream into the void. "No," I told myself, steeling my spine. "This isn't a scream. It's a reckoning." After they were pronounced husband and wife, and the room erupted in applause, I slipped out. My task was simple. The reception was in the grand ballroom across the hall. The wedding planner, a terrifyingly organized woman named Brenda, had a laptop set up to run a slideshow of photos during the father-daughter dance. It was an old-fashioned touch, my mother's idea. A visual journey of our darling Ashley's life, she'd called it. Seen the slideshow. It was a saccharine collection of baby photos, ballet recitals, and graduation pictures. I was in a few of them, a blurry, awkward figure in the background, forever out of focus. Brenda was busy directing guests toward the cocktail hour. The laptop was unattended. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the string quartet's placid rendition of a Vivaldi piece. My hands were shaking. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of champagne and perfume. I walked over to the table, my heels sinking into the plush carpet. On the screen was a folder named Ashley Show. I pulled the USB from my pocket. Felt slick with sweat. With a few clicks, I copied my folder, titled Simply Truth, onto the desktop and dragged its contents into the slideshow program, right after a picture of a 5-year-old Ashley on a pony. I rearranged the order, making sure the cadence was perfect. A few happy memories, then the first crack in the facade. Then another and another. A crescendo of destruction. I deleted my folder from the desktop, ejected my drive, and walked away, melting back into the crowd. No one had noticed. My heart was still pounding, but a strange calm was settling over me. The dice were thrown. There was no going back. The reception was a masterpiece of denial. The tables were draped in ivory linen. The centerpieces were bursting with white roses, and champagne flowed like water. My father gave a speech, his voice thick with emotion as he talked about his precious daughter and his fine new son. I watched my mother, her face a mask of proud serenity. They were brilliant actors. They had been playing these roles my entire life. I avoided my family, making small talk with distant cousins who barely remembered my name. "You're Chloe, right? Ashley's little sister. What are you up to these days?" The question was always the same, the interest always feigned. Finally the moment came. The bandleader announced the father-daughter dance. My father led a beaming Ashley to the center of the floor. The lights dimmed and a spotlight found them. The first notes of My Girl filled the room. On the large screen behind them the slideshow began. A baby picture of Ashley. Os rippled through the crowd. Ashley on her first day of school. More sentimental size. Ashley at her prom, a vision in red. Me and Ashley as kids, building a sandcastle. I was looking at her, she was looking at the camera. That one stung. Ashley on the pony. They swayed on the dance floor, my father whispering something in her ear. Ashley laughing, her head thrown back. They were completely unaware. Then the next slide. It wasn't a family photo. It was a screenshot of an email. From my father's account to Mark's. The subject line was, "The dowry." The text was stark, stripped of all sentimentality. Mark, attached is the revised projection of Anderson Timber's debt restructuring, post-merger with Renshaw Equity. As agreed, your initial capital injection of $15 million upon the finalization of the marriage will secure you a 40% stake. The music faltered for a second as the band's pianist noticed the screen. A confused murmur started at the tables near the front. My father, his back to the screen, was still smiling. Ashley's smile, however, had vanished. She was staring over his shoulder, her brow furrowed in confusion. The next slide. An email from Mark to my father. "Richard, 40% feels light considering the risk I'm taking on. And I'm not just talking about the business. Let's make it 51%. I want a controlling interest. It's the only way I can guarantee Ashley the lifestyle she's accustomed to." The murmuring grew louder. Someone gasped. My mother, seated at the head table, had gone pale. She was staring at the screen, her mouth a perfect of horror. The next slide hit like a physical blow. It was a photo from Mark's hotel room in New York. Him and another woman, brunette and laughing, wrapped in a hotel bathrobe. He was kissing her neck. It was intimate, casual, and utterly damning, but the slideshow wasn't finished. Next, a string of text messages between Mark and Sarah, the brunette. "Sarah. Is the princess bride beautiful? Mark, she's fine. A bit vanilla. But the deal is golden. Almost there. A few more months of playing the good husband and we're set. Sarah. Don't forget about me when you're king of the timber empire. Mark. Never. You're the endgame. A woman at a nearby table audibly sobbed. Ashley made a choked sound like she'd been punched in the gut. She stumbled back from Mark, her hands flying to her mouth. The fairy tale dress suddenly looked like a costume for a tragedy. Ashley, baby, I can explain, Mark stammered, reaching for her. His charm had evaporated, leaving behind a slick sheen of panic. This is fake. Someone is trying to sabotage us. The final slide appeared. It was a simple black screen with white text. A quote I had found online, attributed to a poet I'd never heard of. The brightest sun casts the darkest shadow. The room was utterly silent for 3 seconds, then erupted into chaos. My mother collapsed into her chair, weeping. My father was roaring Mark's name. Guests were standing, whispering, pointing. And Ashley. She just stood there in the middle of the storm, the spotlight still on her, tears streaming down her face, silently shredding her bouquet, petal by white petal. I didn't stay to watch the rest. I turned and walked out of the ballroom, the noise and the wreckage fading behind me. I pushed through the heavy doors and into the quiet, ornate lobby. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt hollow, scraped out, as if I had detonated a bomb and been the only one to feel the full force of the vacuum it left behind. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool, damp Seattle night. The air was clean, smelling of rain and the distant salty breath of the Sound. I walked for blocks with no destination in mind. The sounds of the city a welcome buffer against the screaming in my own head. I had done it. I had burned it all to the ground. The perfect family, the perfect wedding, the perfect lies. I had exposed them all. I found myself at the waterfront, leaning against a railing and staring out at the dark, choppy water of Elliott Bay. The fairy lights slid silently across the horizon. All my life I had wanted them to see me, to acknowledge me. And in one spectacular, catastrophic act, I had made myself unforgettable. I was no longer the shadow. I was the fire. I was the ruin. My phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. My mother. My father. A dozen unknown numbers. I ignored them all. Then, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Hope you're happy. It wasn't signed, but I knew it was from Ashley. Was I happy? Well, happiness was a distant shore I couldn't even see from here. But as I stood there, shivering in the night air, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. It wasn't peace, and it wasn't joy. It was a terrifying, exhilarating, and absolute sense of freedom. The gilded cage was gone. Its bars melted in the inferno I had created. I was alone, adrift in the dark, but for the first time in my life I was on my own. And I had no idea what came next. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left, and thank you for watching.